Well, our starting point tonight is in Ghana. The government has accrued $3 billion after a Eurobond auction that was oversubscribed 5 times. Now, the sale included 7-year bonds at a coupon of 6.375%, 15-year bonds with a coupon of 7.875%, and 41-year paper with a coupon of 8.875%. The 41-year-old Eurobond is the longest dated bond ever issued by a sub-Saharan African government. Huge investor interest was triggered by the strong economic fundamentals coupled with Moody's favorable ratings. The International Monetary Fund recently gave a positive assessment of the Ghanaian economy following the conclusion of a 3-year lending program. Well, let's get all the details on this from Cgtn's Nabil Ahmed Rufai. He joins us now in Accra. Nabil, always great to have you on the show. Now, it is expected that these funds will be channeled towards ongoing reforms in the country, especially as Ghana prepares for presidential election in the 4th quarter of this year. So, Nabil, what do you know so far about how exactly the government plans to use these funds?
Uche, we know that the government plans to finance its budget deficits with this Eurobond. Indeed, during the 2020 budget reading in Parliament last year, the finance minister pointed out that $2 billion was going to be used for that purpose. Aside that, we know that the country hopes to use this Eurobond to meet its infrastructure needs. Ghana always needs about $10 billion every year to bridge its infrastructure gap, and we know that part of the government's efforts this year is targeting infrastructure. Indeed, the government has declared this year the year of roads, meaning that a lot of money is going to be channeled into the construction of roads across the 16 regions of the country in order to meet the infrastructure deficit. And also, we know that the Eurobond is going to help the country service its debts. And lastly, the country last year struggled with its local currency, the cedi. It kept depreciating against the US dollar and the British pound. We know that this Eurobond is going to help the country give the central bank with some reserves to shore up the strengthening of the cedi against the US dollar. This year in January, we've seen the cedi appreciate marginally against the US dollar and also the British pound. We know the government is planning to consolidate this growth of stabilizing the cedi against the US dollar and the British pound. So this Eurobond is also going to be channeled towards that cause in the central bank, Uche.
Well, Nabil, there are also concerns about Ghana's debt sustainability and, of course, the high risk it faces of debt distress. We do know that government debt surged in 2018. Total debt was almost $40 billion US dollars, putting the country's debt to GDP ratio at about 60%. So how is the country handling its debt servicing costs?
So the government has what it calls the debt management strategy, where it wants to really service its debts by looking into domestic securities, preferably going into long-term bonds. We know that this Eurobond that has been secured has 41 years, which is the longest any African country has ever received, and this is part of the debt management strategy that the government has in place. Aside that, the government is also looking at domestic local investors actually to implement its financial strategy by boosting the country's economy, and also it believes that doing this would help service its debts, Uche.
Well, Nabil, last year the state did struggle to plug a budget gap. It was higher than projected, and analysts are already predicting and sounding the alarm that the government will miss its fiscal deficit targets this year, of course, unless there's some more revenue growth. What is the pace of revenue growth in the country right now?
For now, we can say that the pace of revenue growth is quite steady. Early this year, the Ghana Revenue Authority came out to announce that it exceeded its 2019 target of raising $8 billion And indeed, this is something that the government was very, very happy about, that the target it gave the Ghana Revenue Authority has been slightly exceeded. And in the 2020 budget, the government outlined some robust tax generation regime that is going to implement it this year to be able to generate a lot of revenue for the country. So for now, we can say that the country is on course in raising some revenue for the country to meet its budget, Uche.
Now, when the state ended a 4-year extended credit facility program with the IMF last year, it did pledge to maintain its fiscal discipline going forward. What has been this particular government's track record in this area so far?
Uche, in terms of the track record, we can say that, let's look at 2019. The government had a target of its fiscal deficit of 4.2%, but then during the course of 2019, it had to revise it and bring it to 4.5%. At the end of 2019, the government was able to meet that target of 4.5%. Now, we know that in 2018, the government decided to institute what it calls a Fiscal Responsibility Act, which is targeting limiting fiscal spending by 5% of GDP, and it was able to achieve that below 5% in 2019, which was 4.5%. Aside that, this year is actually targeting limiting its fiscal deficit to 4.7%. But some analysts are saying that that may not be feasible, and they are predicting 4.9% for the country. But then we can say that this year is actually an election year, and there is always overspending during election year, and the government is looking to limit its spending this year, hence giving the target of 4.7%. But with analysts saying that it may not be able to achieve that and to go to 4.9%, we know there's going to be some challenge. But then when you compare this election year to the election year 2016, the particular year ended with 7.3% fiscal deficit. So government's track record seems to be quite good in terms of maintaining its fiscal discipline to 5% according to the Fiscal Responsibility Act, Uche.
Quite right. Well, many thanks, Nabil, for your insights there. That was Nabil Ahmed Rufai joining us there in Accra.